Hey there, Christian Yordanov here. In this video, I'm going to go over a couple of clients' lab tests and just show you what kind of imbalances we can actually catch with a very simple urine collection test that is shipped to your home, collected conveniently at home. You basically just pee in the morning and you freeze that urine, and UPS or the courier just comes and picks it up. And really, we get tons and tons of data that I can then use to uncover imbalances in the metabolism and then give you strategies to uh, obviously address those imbalances so they don't turn into very, very serious things down the line. So I'll go over two lab tests of the same urine test from different clients, and just to give you an idea of like what kind of stuff can we catch, and how does the test um, show up in terms of what shows up on a test when someone has kind of decent health and when someone is like in a real poor state of health, right? Which is obviously where we never want to get to that point. But it's a very interesting exercise to contrast the two tests. And then the other thing that's also very interesting is that even though this test on paper, when we look at the auto-generated lab report side of it, it doesn't look too alarming. There's always, if with a more nuanced uh, approach, there's always things we can still optimize. So think about it. You might, let's say you start, I don't know, sprinting, and then it takes you, 20 seconds to sprint 100 meters. In maybe in 3 months you can get that down to 15 seconds, something like that, right? And then the better you get, the more sort of effort and work you have to put in to shave off a second, and then milliseconds and so on and so forth. So with this kind of stuff, although we can do a lot to improve a person's health with the very basic stuff we do, there's always layers and deeper layers we can go on to continue improving. And although we're not really at that point, we're not really getting like huge, like 20-30% improvements in overall health or whatever, energy, whatever the case may be. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% improvements, they kind of, we're looking at the person as a like, this is the most important thing for us to fine tune and optimize our health, be that our brain health, our gastrointestinal health, our psychological health. Like this is the one great work in life that we have to work on. So for me, it's not a matter of, we're just kind of nitpicking and just being pedantic and finding like micro things to obsess about. It's more like, no, this is not a crappy Golf 2.0 or whatever from 1989 or whatever. This is a Ferrari, Lamborghini supercar that is expensive, priceless, and we want to keep it as well tuned and maintained. And I'm talking about our body, our health. We want to keep it maintained, fine tuned for as long as possible, right? So this first test here, these are like the auto-generated lab things. So you can see here, you get these functional imbalance scores of. By the way, if you're listening to this on the podcast, there will be a link in the description to the video on the website where you can actually watch the video of the lab tests as I go over them, in case you're wondering what the hell is this guy talking about. So on the first page of this test, they give you these functional imbalance scores, and here it looks really good. Everything is like green, 0, 0, 0. So 0 for oxidative stress, which need for antioxidant support, is this sort of bucket of markers, which has some amino acids, lipid peroxides, DNA damage, some nutrients, stuff like that. Then there's need for mitochondrial support. This is a mitochondrial dysfunction bucket of markers, and here has a 0 here, this client. Then the need for reduced exposure, so toxic exposure is also a 0. So a bunch of like lead, mercury, everything's like green, cadmium, arsenic, detox capacity, glutathione looks good. And need for methylation support is a 4, but still green. So if you look at this, like, and I guarantee you, if a doctor looks at this test, they might just be like, this is totally fine. Get out of here. Get out of my office. Go and live your life. You're healthy as a clam, you know. And this is why uh, this tool would be useless in most doctors' hands. And actually, this is why insurance doesn't cover it. And most, not I won't say most, but many doctors have not even heard of this test. And I have doctors, clients who had not heard of this test, right? But a lot of doctors, because they're so allopathically trained, they have no sort of understanding of the deeper nuances that we can glean here, because they're looking to identify, diagnose, treat symptom, right? That's literally all of it. If not, let's just start cutting things out of people. So it looks upon first glance looks good, but I never trust this. And then they give you some further. They give you like so they do give recommendations. So here you can see the green, no recommendation for those vitamins and minerals. Yellow, some recommendation. They actually give you lab generated amounts that, you know, I don't use this part, but you know, you see antioxidants, B vitamins. So they actually do recommend, despite it all being green up here, they do recommend some B vitamins, some minerals, some digestive support enzymes, some amino acids and stuff. But again, and they give you, it's kind of cool. They give you a little bit of like an overview of what does this nutrient do, and it's kind of cool. So clients enjoy reading this part of the report, at least the ones that are more into their health and stuff. But I don't really use this stuff too much, because you know, these lab generated things, you know, it's like using AI to help with your health. It's, what's the point? Like, we have humans that can do this. Why are we using AI, which is so inferior still, or you know, algorithms? And then they show you this really cool, basically, where oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction clues lie. So we have the whole sort of very high level, how, you know, we produce energy. So you have fatty acids go through beta oxidation. A substrate there called acetyl-CoA can be created, which can go into the citric acid cycle. And there's a lot of steps there in the citric acid cycle that require, of course, nutrients to function. And then certain toxic metals can inhibit some of those steps. So, for example, let's say, for example, this step here, citric acid, has cofactors required. But then, for example, arsenic or mercury, they can inhibit this step. So if this is elevated on a client's test, one of those toxic metals, you could then, you know, think, okay, maybe there's some kind of energy production blockage. So this gets a little bit more advanced, but it's really cool to start understanding this at a deeper level, because it then allows us to create better supplement protocols for clients that truly are addressing imbalances that we can corroborate with lab work. But let's not get too kind of in depth here. So the first page of markers that we get, you have a bunch of organic acids here. So we have malabsorption and dysbiosis markers. And here, you know, there's one marker kind of trending towards the yellow, one dysbiosis marker kind of in the red, but the rest doesn't really scream any like big issues. Now this client does have some did have historically some digestive issues, but they were often just would be alleviated by eating cleaner. So like probably nothing too crazy for us to kind of suspect. The candida marker here, arabinotol, is kind of in the green, so not suspecting like yeast overgrowth or malabsorption, or something like you know, potentially pancreatic dysfunction or insufficiency. Then we have cellular energy and mitochondria markers. You know, most of these again are kind of in range. Some of them are a little bit on the low end. Now there is an overnight fast. Obviously you're taking this test in the morning, so you will be obviously fasting overnight. So some of these markers can be low just for that reason. So nothing like it's super like crazy in the red. Nothing really is really necessarily screaming at me there's mitochondrial dysfunction or cellular energy production issues. But of course we can always, like, there's layers to this. Then there's some vitamin markers. Most of them are kind of in the range. Some are trending toward the yellow. So some of these, for example, the biotin markers, because there's two biotin markers, and one is just in the green, but very close to the yellow, and then the other one is just between on the border of green and yellow. That to me is indicating maybe there isn't like a frank biotin deficiency that will cause like symptoms that are textbook symptoms of a deficiency of a vitamin, but it is certainly prudent to supplement this nutrient for a while, right? Then other B vitamins, we use plenty of B vitamins with clients. So this just some of these markers. I feel like we could bump up some of the B vitamins, but probably because normally we do these lab tests before we ramp up the full supplement protocol. I think it's not probably a lot of these markers are probably going to be in a much better range after the full supplement protocol has been started by the client. So a lot of things, the nice things by the time we see the markers could be like 3-4 weeks after the client's in the program. By that time, a lot of things that are kind of out of whack or likely already have been addressed by the protocols that we create for the clients, or are on their way to being addressed. So nothing too worrying here either. Then we have these neurotransmitter markers. So these are proxy markers, and there's a really cool one here called quinolinic acid, which is actually a marker of neuroinflammation. So think neuroinflammation, think very, very early stages of some kind of dementia, Alzheimer's. That's like at a very basic level. If there's a lot of neuroinflammation for a very long time, we're talking about neurodegeneration. So if something like this is in the yellow already, we want to just nip it in the bud really quickly. In this case, it looks like it's at a healthy range, so nothing to worry about. Some of these markers here can indicate vitamin B6 deficiency if they're out of whack, but nothing is really screaming at us B6 deficiency so far. Then we have catecholamine markers, so like your dopamine, your adrenaline, stuff like that. And this is something I'm kind of seeing in a fair portion of people is like a low dopamine. And then there's the serotonin marker, 5-hydroxyiindoacetic acid, 5-HIIA is the marker. That's kind of trending toward the yellow. And this I actually suspected before we got the lab test, because I can kind of, based on people's symptoms, and then with this client it was like sleep issues and low energy type stuff. So based on the presentation of the client and my clinical assessment, I can kind of preempt, and I'm almost like, sometimes I even tell clients during our initial clinical assessment, I tell them I'm pretty sure when we get the lab test results that your dopamine will be high and potentially your serotonin breakdown marker might be elevated or close to the yellow at least. And in this case, it was the case. Luckily, in this case, we actually had already started doing stuff around boosting dopamine, breaking down serotonin and stuff like that. So again, at this point, it's just corroborating my hypotheses earlier on. We're not really changing much at this point. We're just kind of holding steady and just adding some things on top, just kind of further optimizing, right? Because you do this a few times, you start seeing patterns, and then you start preempting things. That's why I always tell clients that are like, oh, but I don't know if I can afford these lab tests. First of all, the lab tests are super affordable. But I always tell clients, I don't want ever the lab test to be the deal breaker of whether we get to help you or not. Because whether or not we do a lab test, I've had plenty of clients that they do a bunch of lab testing. They come to me, they upload the lab test in the client portal. I look over the lab tests, and then I ask them, okay, what was done about this marker? What was done about this lab test? The stool test. And so many times I hear, well, that other practitioner did nothing about this, or they ran the test themselves and they did nothing about it. So the key isn't running lab tests and getting pieces of paper with numbers on them. The key is doing the protocols that help the person get healthier, right? Now, the lab tests can be very helpful. Of course, like I say it often, they help us catch imbalances that the naked eye cannot catch, which is super valuable, invaluable. But a lot of the times, because I've seen these patterns over and over again, we already give clients, some aspect of their protocol is already designed to uh, address these issues. So whether or not we get the lab work showing that the issue is there, we're still going to do something about the issue, right? So I never want folks to ever think that if I can't do the lab test, I can't do the program, because we've done a lot of great work with a lot of clients without doing any lab tests either. It's just, I often say, if if you can afford it, like it's not gonna, like you're not gonna be in debt, that you can still buy groceries that month and all that stuff, or you have some savings. If you can afford it, I would do it, because I can't think of a better way to invest our money than in our own health. And you talk to people that might have like a 401k, stock portfolio, crypto portfolio that's like 6 figures plus, and they're putting away money, and they might have like Airbnbs, and they then when it comes to like a few $100 for a lab test, they're like, I don't know. Like, no, like that, it should be like the complete opposite. Like, we need to be investing in our health first, then we create our budget. That kind of, it's like that the funny bro science video. It's like, they asked him a question: what if I can't afford to buy protein, or what if protein, my budget doesn't allow to buy protein? It's like, you got it backwards, man. You buy your protein and then you make your budget. That's so that's kind of like, I'd be like, I buy my supplements, buy the best quality food I can afford, and then I make my budget after that. So that's kind of that's the switch we have to make, because listen, in 10 years time, all the things that you thought were more important than this kind of stuff, you'll see that were not more important, and in 20 years time, even more so. So the sooner we make that switch, that okay, a little bit of lab testing, a few more supplements here and there, better quality food, these are the most important supplement investments we can make today, not buying Amazon stock or whatever the hell. Then the toxin and detox markers for this client. He was like about 6 weeks into the program, so he was already doing some stuff. I think we took the lab test a little bit into, he was already doing some stuff, but he was already like, doing things on his own, right? So his pyroglutamic, which is like your glutathione marker, that was like almost smack bang in the middle, which is really good. That you don't want it to be in the yellow, definitely not in the red, either direction, because that indicates your detox capacities are overburdened, or there's some kind of deficiency, possibly from the diet or nutritionally, that is not allowing you to, to detox as well as you could. Then there's a couple of toxin markers, actually, styrene and MTB. It's like a gasoline additive. These are in the green. This is good because I often see these in the yellow, and that just indicates people are very likely just being exposed to like gasoline fumes from driving a lot in traffic. So I like to see this. It's always good, because the less toxic exposures a person is dealing with, the easier our job is to help them optimize their health. So looking okay so far. Then we have oxalate markers. There was one marker here elevated into the red, but there is actually a very valid reason why that's elevated. Most likely it's because of increased hydroxyproline consumption, the amino acid, due to some of the dietary changes we did with the client. So that's probably the reason, most likely. So nothing to worry about there. Then the lipid peroxidation / oxidative stress marker. So we have the DNA damage marker here, 8-OHTG, which just really rolls off the tongue. 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. Say that out loud 5 times. A 2, very low. Really one of the lowest I've seen. So DNA damage marker looking really well, looking really kind of in a very healthy range. And then the lipid peroxidation. So this is 5.2, kind of pretty far from in the yellow territory. Could it be a little bit lower? Sure. There's definitely stuff in the protocol that will help to over time probably lower this. I would say I would probably bet good money that if we were to do this test, let's say in 3 months, this marker would be lower. But it's still not in a range where I'd at all be worried, because it's not even in the yellow, never mind in the red. And then there's some amino acid markers here. Now these a lot of these amino acid markers will tend to be like on the low end, because you're fasting overnight and then you're taking the urine sample in the morning. So it's kind of normal that they're low. But what I saw here, the biggest thing that screamed out to me here was that the one amino acid here, methionine, was very high. It was actually not only in the red, it was off the chart. So the range is 2 to 16, and the marker here was the value here was 33. It's like almost more than 2x over the top of the range. So to me, that could be some kind of methylation issue, and that's probably why they had the methylation was green up top there, but it was a 4. So this is where some kind of nutrient in the methylation cycle could be deficient, and this is where once you see this, then you can start going back here up top, and then you can start reevaluating some of these vitamin markers, some of these neurotransmitter markers. You can start evaluating, for example, if that methionine was high, and then one of these kynurenine pathway markers was elevated, which can be a sign of a vitamin B6 deficiency. I could then say, okay, that's possible that vitamin B6, because it can be used to in that sort of the methylation homocysteine cycle, that could be low, hence why the methionine has built up. And then we start kind of going back, or could it be folate, B12, and then you start evaluating all of these, and then we can make a decision what nutrients to add to see if some kind of blockage in the methylation pathways can be unblocked. And what I actually told this client specifically, I don't normally do this, although it's a good marker to run once in a while. I actually told the client to go and get his homocysteine blood marker checked, because if that comes back as somewhat elevated, like 11, 12 plus, that for sure indicates a methylation issue, which could be alleviated by certain B vitamins, right? That's one thing. But then further from that, what I would do at that point is I would be thinking, could there be some kind of genetic polymorphism, SNP, like a single nucleotide polymorphism, or multiple in some of the genes, like the MTHFR, MTR, MTRR, all these genes that are part of these methylation sort of enzymes. So at that point, I would probably do. They're pretty cheap. These nutrigenomic tests are like $300, but I would do that test, and I don't necessarily tell everyone to do that. Although it doesn't hurt. Like I've done a few on myself, and even on my daughter when she was born. We used a fake name, so we don't even have to use a real name if people don't want to, have their a name associated with the data. But it's good to know, because we all have certain genetic vulnerabilities. It's kind of a little bit luck of the draw, but knowing them then allows us to put in a nutritional strategy that allows us to ameliorate the risks caused by those polymorphisms. For example, I have the MTHFR C6770. I am homozygous for that one, which is bad, quote unquote. And when I got that test back in 2018, when I got the results, I was like, oh my god! I was like almost noceboing myself. Oh my god, this is so bad! Like, woe is me. And then I just realized, oh no, you just take a few nutrients and make sure that your homocysteine doesn't creep up, and that's kind of kept in check. And super easy to put in a strategy for life. And this with one genetic test, your vulnerabilities, a little bit of analysis, for life what to do to ameliorate some of these issues. And then, but what was interesting is, as I was digging a bit deeper into that at the time, I saw that a lot of the issues that run in my family actually have been associated with that MTHFR uh, polymorphism. So it started to make a lot of sense. Then we have a vulnerability in the family, and it has been expressing in depression, atherosclerosis, blah blah blah, miscarriage, stuff like that. And I just wonder, my family members, that of course they wouldn't listen to me at the time, especially that was so long ago as well. They thought this was just another, oh, this is just another thing. He'll get past this and he'll move on to another thing. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So I'm just wondering, a lot of the stuff in my family that we've had as ailments, I wonder, could it have been prevented, with just knowing this and putting in this nutritional strategy. So anyway, we with this client, we're gonna put in some stuff. We already did put in some stuff around this, and then that homocysteine marker will give us more clues as to, should we do a little bit of a further investigation with nutrigenomics testing. But in all cases, no matter what the client chooses, there are some nutritional strategies that are good to do to make sure that that homocysteine, is kept in as low as possible within kind of reason, like 7-8 type, in terms of range, because it's actually an independent, quote unquote, cardiovascular risk factor, apart from like cholesterol and all this kind of nonsense, high blood pressure, which is legit, but it is an independent risk factor. So there is like this inflammatory component to methionine, So it's important, stuff like this, that when we get a clue on the test, that we just do a little bit of deeper investigation when prudent, because sometimes, again, we're talking about, can we prevent issues from happening, 30 years down the line. And there was more stuff here as well. Obviously, this is already 27 minutes. I want to move on to the next test. There was other stuff here that we can kind of discuss. But I just want to go to the last page here with the nutrient marker. So you can see with this client, the toxic metals, all of them are in the yellow. There's no green range for toxic metals, so it's only yellow and red. But nothing was in the red, right? Which is great. Some of them were below detectable level, which is great. Then the nutrient elements. This is where we can see if something is in the yellow to the red. This is interesting, because this indicates the body is not excreting the nutrient, the mineral, for a couple of possible reasons. There's a severe lack of it in the body, like deficiency, and or a lack of it in the diet. And when that happens chronically, and the body starts kind of like, man, I'm running out of this stuff, I need this stuff, there's not enough to go around, then anything you ingest, the body's going to hold on to, right? It's really smart that way. And that means you're not going to be excreting it in the urine. For example, here the manganese, right? Below detectable level. The only one that's of concern here when it's below detectable level is the iron, because that can actually mean that iron is not being excreted, which is actually not good, right? Because iron can, as it builds up in the body, it can cause oxidative stress. So that is something that there are pathways that can be boosted here. But things like manganese, if it's below detectable level, something like selenium, kind of edging between red and yellow, chromium is in the yellow. That just indicates that we need to do more with the minerals, which we were already, the client was already, like I said, on the program several weeks. So we're already doing some stuff with minerals, but this just indicates we need to do more. So these are the kind of things, and this is somebody like, about 40 years of age or so, decent health, just, lack of energy, like sleep is not great, some gut stuff over the year, just various, like, nothing like mega debilitating by any means, but there's a lot of stuff that we can still catch. And this is the thing, a lot of guys out there are a little bit like stiff upper lip, I'm fine, until they're not, and they just kill over and, gonzo. So a lot of guys, they can be fine until they're, literally, you know what I mean. So it's important for us to never judge necessarily that I don't have visible outward symptoms, therefore everything's fine in my body. Because in today's world, it's impossible. I have not done this test on one person where everything was like satisfactory. Even with some very healthy people, like my Major League Baseball pitcher guy, we ran this test on him. We found stuff. Charlie Robinson, my buddy, the macroaggressions host, super healthy guy. Like it still amazes me that like how few imbalances we find with him on the lab tests. Like I said before, we gotta study this guy like scientifically, but we still find something, if you know what I mean. Now, let's contrast this with somebody who last year was hospitalized. I should say older gentleman than the previous client, maybe 25 years or so older, but he was hospitalized in Asia with some kind of intestinal parasite. He told me when we went over his lab tests earlier this year. He told me that once I explained all of the imbalances I see on the tests, he told me, "Oh, well, that explains why last year I felt like I was dying." Right? Now, keep in mind, this lab work we got it about, I guess, 6 to 7 months later, after that incident with with the hospitalization. But as you can see here, we have on the last test we had a all green, 0, 0, 0, and a 4. Here we have 8, 7, 7, and a 2. So red, yellow, yellow, and then one green. So oxidative stress, need for antioxidant support high, 8. Need for mitochondrial support. So this just indicates mitochondrial dysfunction, which of course indicates issues with producing energy. And if you can't produce energy, it's like if your car runs out of fuel type thing. You can't do much with your car. You can probably like nap in it or something, be protected from the elements, but not much else useful. Similarly, if you can't produce energy in the body, a lot of things start shutting down because they need energy, they need fuel. Need for reduced toxic exposure, a 7, right? So we'll discuss that later, and then methylation supported too. So let's see what the lab. So look, the lab are recommending severely or very strongly recommending antioxidant stuff, B vitamins, yellows and reds, and some minerals, GI support, amino acids. So even like even the automated report knows, man, this guy needs a lot of support. And then when we start looking at the actual markers, I'll just scroll down through all of this stuff. So when we start looking at the actual markers, this is where it starts to get a little bit crazy. So you can see some markers here around malabsorption and dysbiosis, some markers that are off the charts, like 4x, 4.5x off the charts. Phenolacetic, that's a malabsorption marker. Dysbiosis marker, 4x above the range. Another one above the range here. A couple of in the yellow, one almost in the yellow. A couple, the Candida marker, something like 4x over the top of the range. And then these are other fungal markers here, citramalic and tartaric. So what this is indicating is digestion issues, like breaking down food and absorbing it. So severe disruption probably of the gut lining, which is you secrete enzymes there, and those cells are supposed to absorb then those nutrients. So indicating malabsorption, putrefaction probably of the food, issues digesting the food, candida overgrowth, right? Because he was given some antibiotics as well, so that could cause further imbalances there. Then energy production, cellular energy and mitochondrial markers, fatty acid metabolism off the chain. Now this can indicate, these two fatty acid metabolism markers are probably indicating he's oxidizing a lot of fat. And here's what you have to understand. All the keto and low carb and the fasting people that tell you, you have to become a fat burning machine, they don't realize people on their deathbed are basically like burning a ton of fat, like cancer and stuff like that. So burning a lot of fat it shows the body's in an extreme stress state, right? So there's further here carbohydrate metabolism, this stuff in the yellow. So this is indicating issues with carbohydrate metabolism, further energy metabolism issues here. So just in general, this screams mitochondrial dysfunction, which of course then causes energy production issues. And then if you don't have sufficient energy, you can't deal with toxins, with bacterial stuff, fungal stuff. It just indicates severe also malnutrition, because also this gentleman was largely vegetarian for a long time for various reasons. And this is just end stage kind of dysfunction culminating. Then the vitamin markers, nothing too crazy out of the range here. A couple of things out of the range. So definitely, B7 could be added here, but nothing like too crazy on the side of things. Then the neurotransmitter metabolites. This quinolinic acid, remember I said that's a marker of neuroinflammation. That's like a 7.9 in the yellow, above the middle of the yellow range. So that's indicating some neuroinflammation, aka neurodegeneration. That's because when you have inflammation, that damages the tissue. So no matter where that inflammation is, tissues around in the surrounding areas are gonna, there's gonna be collateral damage. It's like sometimes I talk about, like, imagine like your bookshelf catches on fire and you take the fire extinguisher and then you extinguish the fire, but then your books are damaged from whatever foam stuff was in the fire extinguisher. So with inflammation, although it's initiated with good intentions by the body, when it's chronic, caused by a bunch of stuff in the body, whether that's toxins, infections, food sensitivities, whatever immune system reactivity is going on, that inflammation that's chronic becomes damaging to the tissues. Then what's interesting here is the serotonin marker was also like 2 times above the top of the range off the charts. That's the highest I've ever seen it. And generally when the serotonin breakdown marker is high, people tend to have more health problems. The higher I've seen it, the more health problems people have. So, which is indicating a lot of further gut dysfunction, right? Because you have heard that 90% of the serotonin in the body is made in the gut. And so if there's a lot of gut dysfunction, like intestinal permeability, leaky gut type stuff, then some of that serotonin can actually get absorbed systemically. And then we also know that certain amoeba and parasites and stuff like that, they can actually secrete serotonin as well. So it's possible that there's something else in there. But this is a marker of very severe stress. And then actually this serotonin will then feed into the cellular energy side of things, because it's basically a metabolic sort of inhibitor. So because it rises in times of stress, one of its mechanisms is to actually slow down the body, slow down the sort of the mitochondrial respiratory chain, where the energy production pipeline. It's kind of, that's sort of a survival mechanism. So if you're under severe stress for whatever reason, fasting or starvation or whatever the case may be, it could be psychological stress. Any stress to the body, it's a survival thing, right? So it will slow down the metabolism as a result of the stress in order to prolong its survival. So that's kind of I can see how this high serotonin can be potentially disrupting some of these, the cellular energy mitochondrial pathways. Then the toxin and detox marker. So here you can see the glutathione marker, pyroglutamic, is in the yellow. So remember, the previous client was almost smack bang in the middle of the green. Here it's elevated. And if it's elevated or low, in both cases, it's indicating some kind of glutathione deficiency. In this case, I suspected that the client would just the vegetarian sort of the sources of protein in the vegetarian sort of fare are really not great, not very bioavailable. I would say probably just like a chronic protein deficiency here, and then probably a lot of toxic exposure from various sources. For example, you can see the styrene, the MTBE markers, whereas they were in the green with the previous lab test. Here, one is in the yellow, and one is in the red. So probably a lot of exposure to like fumes, you know, and understanding the context of the client. I would absolutely, just knowing like more about the person, I know that is definitely true. So they were definitely getting exposures. Then we have the oxalate markers, nothing too crazy there. Then the oxidative stress markers, we have the lipid peroxides off the charts. So I had never, before this test, I had never seen any of these oxidative stress markers beyond yellow. Now his 8-OHDG, the DNA damage marker, is in the yellow 11, which very concerning. Like the previous one was 2 on the other client's lab work. So we're talking, you know, more than 5-fold increase of DNA damage. Now this gentleman is older, but you know this is very, very concerning. And then the lipid peroxide, man, like, so this is probably one of the most concerning things about it, because that's just indicating a lot of lipids in the body, which could be cellular components, it could be brain cells, it could be mitochondria, it could be cells anywhere in the body that, you know, they have these lipid things, lipid portions, you know, in the organelles and stuff like that. So what's indicating is that the oxidative stress from toxins, whatever inflammation, whatever the cause is, a lot of that is causing a lot of oxidative stress, which in a very simple term is just damage. Like imagine you have a wall, a structure, a house, and it has walls, and then the elements start battering it, you know, tornadoes, hurricanes, and inside the house or around the house you find like bits of brick with cement. Like that's what they're measuring in the urine. They're measuring lipid peroxide. So what used to be like a lipid, like a full brick, fatty acid, or some other kind of derivative from a fatty acid, is now like some kind of other thing, like so half a brick or like a chunk of a brick or a bunch of stuff. So that's just this is quite simply indicating damage to structural components inside that person. So you can imagine cells getting damaged, organelles getting damaged, and that gets excreted in the urine. Now, if you understand from a functional perspective that when a cell gets damaged, it can also hurt cells around it. If it's, you know, if it dies, it could like damage the ones around it, for example. But then those cells are part of a tissue, which could be like in the lungs, it could be in the brain, a blood vessel, it could be the heart, the skin. So that tissue then is part of an organ, right? So the more damage happens to cells and tissues, the more damage happens to the organ. And then sooner or later, that organ will accumulate enough damage where it will stop functioning correctly. And that's when we have symptoms. And then when an organ is not functioning correctly, organ systems start to malfunction. That's where you have, you know, various other health problems start occurring. By this point, the person has a very serious symptoms, right? And this is way, way late in the game. So anytime we're dealing with markers like this, like we're talking someone that's really late in the game. And I hate to say it, but a lot of people that get to the stage where the lab work shows stuff like this, a lot of people probably are very close to the point of no return, if you know what I mean. So this particular gentleman was very lucky that our paths crossed, because, you know, like I don't even want to think what could have happened, you know. Then here we have, what's interesting is the arginine here was quite high, while most of the other stuff was like in the range or low. I'm kind of, now I see it now, I'm kind of thinking the arginine, because it's a precursor to nitric oxide, I wonder, is the body producing more nitric oxide, maybe as like to deal with the potential infection. I think because we can use nitric oxide to like kill stuff. So I wonder maybe that's why it's elevated. I wonder. Um, but and the citrulline as well, it's kind of elevated. So just some of these markers now, I'm looking at them with fresh eyes. I wonder, could this proline be elevated because of the state of degeneration, where the body's breaking down collagen? Proline is a collagen, an amino acid found in collagen structures. So I wonder, is the body just breaking down collagen for the amino acids so they can be turned to like fatty acids, ketones, or uh, glucose, or just be used for other purposes in the body for more, shall we say, more vital for survival functions. But yeah, just overall, like, I mean, even up to now, like, this screams to me, this person is in a very end stage of this health issues and dysfunction. But then when we get to the toxic metals, like, things were get even crazier. I've never seen 5 toxic metals in the red on a test. So we have arsenic just into the red, barium way into the red, cesium, nickel in the red as well. Those two in the red, thallium as well in the red, and actually 6, tungsten as well in the red. And then we have, a few others kind of close to the border of red and yellow: rubidium, cadmium, aluminum, depends on where you're at. And then there was, of course, iron below the detectable level, so another case of like issues with excreting iron, which can further cause oxidative stress in the body. And then chromium very low, vanadium, so like selenium, molybdenum on the low end. So, and then look at this magnesium. Magnesium was super crazy, off the charts, elevated. It was actually so elevated that it was above the upper limit of the technology to measure it, right? So they have a, below detectable level for the markers, but they also have like there's a point where it's above the upper limit, so they're just like, basically it's a shitload of magnesium. So what this indicates is another thing: under stress, the organism will kind of excrete certain minerals, like, for example, zinc, magnesium, also sodium as well. So this is just likely showing further, corroborating that the person is under severe stress here. And then also potentially the calcium being this high. I can't remember if he had started the calcium and magnesium supplement I had recommended months earlier, actually. But if the calcium is high, that I wonder, this is now me speculating at this point, but could it be because of potentially bone getting broken down to provide, the collagen amino acids that the body can then use for energy, for other more vital for survival functions, for detoxification, which is clearly taxed here. So, but like this is just an interesting couple of case studies where we can contrast someone in their 40s, some health challenges, nothing too severe, some fatigue, low energy, sleep issues, some gut stuff, things like that. And we can still find a lot of imbalances there, right? And again, minor imbalances, nothing like insane by any means, but there's still something to optimize. And then on the other hand, someone who was just in this sort of state of decline for a very long time, and this is how it can manifest on these lab tests, And obviously, you don't have time to go in full depth on all of this stuff, but you can see why a test like this is so valuable to run, because, of course, we never want to end up in this more end stage scenario for sure. But we also don't want to let things fester under the surface without our knowledge of this, going on for years and decades, because a lot of the time, by the time let's say the neuroinflammation marker or the detox marker, by the time we catch that as, deficient or elevated or whatever, by the time we catch that, you have to understand that a lot of the body is amazing at like maintaining quote unquote homeostasis, keeping it together, keeping you breathing, functioning, doing all the stuff. but a lot of trade-offs are made, right? So you can imagine if you don't have, let's say, a household doesn't have enough of a budget for everything, like repairs and food and electricity. So over time, they might like be able to pay the electricity bill and get food, but over time, as the household, they might not be able to make repairs. So the household will deteriorate over time when the budget is way below what the full needs of the household are. So similarly in the body will continue to function for a very long time. That's why you see like really old folks that like are in really rough shape. They can barely function, but they're still alive because the body is good at maintaining us alive in times of severe stress and lack of nutrition and toxicity and so on. But the idea is, let's not ever get there, and along the way, let's not allow little things like this become big things down the line. Because again, if you're not detoxifying things well today, you might not feel any different, but next year you might have a decline 1%. That's imperceptible. Then the year after that, that might compound, and then it might compound and compound and compound. And in 10 years, you could be like, oh my God, I'm like 50 or I'm 60 and I can't get out of the bed. And it's because when you're not detoxing, what's happening? It's not just you're not detoxing, stuff is building up, further dysfunction and damage is being caused peripherally. So this is where we can kind of open the floodgates to dysfunction. That's why a lot of folks, they can just have a very precipitous decline at some point in their life. So we want to get to the point where we make sure we stay resilient and we catch. It's like think about it. Just to give an analogy, if your car, if you take like just I think last year I took my car. The guy told me there's something on the alternator that is not working right. It will be fine for a while. The car will work, but eventually it will kill the battery. Then you need a new battery, and then you need to eventually change the alternator and stuff like that. So what most people do is what I did is like, okay, how much is an alternator? Okay, like that's kind of affordable. So I was like, let's just change the alternator, and avoid the issue later on. And then the guy was like, let's see if the battery lasts you another while. It might last. I'm like, oh, bollocks, I'll be back here probably next week. And I was like, back there next week. It lasted 2 days, and then the battery like was dead in the morning. I was like, oh, geez, now I have to deal with this. But then you just replace the alternator, you replace the battery, and people are like, oh, it's $200, whatever, $500. Just get it done. I don't want a bigger issue down the line. I don't want to be stranded on the side of the road, 100 miles from my house. Similarly with the body, we need to take this approach. It might be a marginal deficiency of something, might be a marginal incapacity to detoxify optimally, but the longer that is left unchecked, the more likely down the line it could cause us issues that are going to be a lot more impactful than our car having problems. Because when it's your body, a lot of people that are blessed with good health, bless them, happy for them that they're healthy, but they sometimes don't appreciate the good health, and they're like, I'm going to be fine forever, like I was in my 20s. And then as soon as you're met with a health problem, you're like, oh, okay, well, health is important. This is the most important thing I need to invest in. So this is just, of course, one small aspect of the Live Longer formula. Not, like I said, not all clients even run this test, but it's not necessarily the test that's so important, because like after a few years we might be running a different test. Like 2 years ago I was running just the organic acids tests. Like it would be mostly just these markers, and now this one became available, so now we get more markers. So there could be other tests and other markers that could be useful. So it's it's not really about the test. It's about, I always tell people, it's about us assessing your health, and then you doing the stuff that I recommend, and then us supporting you along the way to make sure you do it, and to make sure you do it right, and you don't just do the things you think are important or are easy, or have some kind of mental blocks to doing some of the other stuff. That's the important part, is doing the stuff and getting the support along the way, because a lot of people they just give up on their own. So this is the kind of stuff we can catch. Super fun. I love analyzing these things and kind of putting connecting dots and putting things together. Sometimes I feel like I wonder, especially with a client with less stuff going on and they feel better and we're just optimizing. Sometimes I wonder, are they gonna perceive that I'm like overzealous and sort of over nitpicky with the stuff? But I always say I would rather kind of err on the side of more support and caution and making sure that minor things are get addressed now than not, because I mean that's why you came to me. That's what you came to me for, right? You came to me for me to get my eyes on your your diet, lifestyle, nutrition, gut health, and give you. You're like coming like I see every client, no matter their state of health, like a prize horse, like a prized like a elite athlete. And I'm not just trying to get them to like run the sprint in 20 seconds. I'm trying to get them to get to an elite level for them. It's not a competition by any means, but for them, I want them to be the best they can be. Because I know most people are like at best, like 70% of their true potential health wise, metabolic health wise, and a lot of people make up that deficit by stressing their body, by pushing their body. Cortisol, coffee, energy drinks, sleeping less than they should, and they're just on overdrive, but that doesn't end well. We should be able to do that without having that kind of push, the artificial push. Not saying you shouldn't have the coffee or whatever, but it's it shouldn't be necessary to function at your peak, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. If you still have not booked a metabolic function assessment with myself or Ryan, our head of client success, make sure you do so that we can see how we can be of service to you. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.